Good morning, Zio here, and today, Gamergate. Wait, Gamergate? I'm reading that right? Anyway, it's been nearly a decade, and apparently Gamergate is still the boogeyman that keeps giving. So, grab yourself some coffee, sit back, relax, and let's get into it, shall we? Haha, yay! So, yeah, hope you got your coffee, because all I have is a Coke. A Pepper, Dr. Pepper. I'm totally not sponsored, by the way. Anyway. Yeah. So, this is what I ran across today, because why not? It is January 26, 2023 when this was written. In reality, this is like the 30th of January, but still. Yeah. They fought for diversity in gaming, and then the abuse begins. Okay, whatever. Anyway, nearly a decade after Gamergate, and those making inclusive video games are still facing vitriol from doctored image and rape threats, because why not? Yeah, I'm sure they are. Anyway, in reality, people make bad video games and they don't like it when people don't like their bad video games. And when they do make bad video games, like a recent one that we talked about, what was it? Forsaken? No, not Forsaken. Foreseen or something like it. I can't even remember what it was called. Anyway, it's just a bad game. Bad writing, bad everything. I mean, the only good thing they usually get these days is graphics now. So it's whatever. Anyway, so we've got this entire giant article that we're not going to go into all the way through, but apparently we're making this case that apparently Gamergate is still a big thing. Like it didn't die back in like 2016 or something, and it has been over with and everything. But you know, we've got to keep that door open for that boogeyman, right? So anyway, we start off with about apparently Ashley Johnson, the chance to be a voice actor in a post-apocalyptic video game, The Last of Us Part 2. Had no idea who Ashley Johnson actually is, but apparently she is a voice actor for somebody. Her character Ellie, she's the voice actor for Ellie from The Last of Us Part 2, apparently. But yeah, and apparently she received blah blah blah, nobody cares in reality. Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure why the voice actor for Ellie was getting anything, considering Ellie should have been the main protagonist, but instead they went with Abby, you know, the butch man looking girl, and she was not a likable character. Not to mention that she kills off Joel at the beginning of the damn game. That pissed off a lot of people, and you know, they talk about how it was subverting blah 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 and all that bullshit that everybody likes to do these days, subverting expectations and stuff instead of actually writing a good story about something we actually want to see, like, you know, how Ellie goes on and stuff. Instead, we're half the game stuck behind somebody who's very unlikable that people just don't care for. Anyway, so they're making the case The Last of Us Part 2 was this amazing thing, a gift from God, better than sliced bread, that sort of thing. You know, because it won Game of the Year and all this other stuff. And to be honest, I thought it was on other platforms besides PS4. I forgot it was like an exclusive, because I wanted to check the Metacritic just out of curiosity, because I hadn't seen it in years. But yeah, it's still not got the best score from the users of 5.8, which makes it mixed. You know, it's about halfway between the 1 and the 10, or the 0 and the 10, and of course 93 for the actual critics and stuff. But yeah, so why what does this have to do with Gamergate? Because apparently it has everything to do with Gamergate, because they said it in the tagline. But yeah, so here we are talking about how it won 2020 Game Awards when there were better games out there. Anyway, and when it comes to like the Game Awards and the Joystick Awards and stuff, it's kind of like the Oscars. Whoever paid the most money to do whatever usually wins anyway, for the most part. And everybody else is just sort of there because they're there. And then they talk about Electronic Gaming Monthly, which is an old magazine. Geez, I hadn't seen that in years, from 2004, where they apparently had an article on how to apparently manipulate your girlfriend into playing video games. The article includes 6 strategies and backups. If all else fails and she refuses to touch your joypad, I'm pretty sure that is a how to get in bed with your girlfriend article. I should have looked that up. I wonder if that's even accessible online, if we could actually look up that article just to see what it was really about. Oh, but anyway, the article is typical of the era where naked women were the norm in video game advertising. Yeah, because sex sells. Look, I'm sorry. If you haven't heard this before, sex sells. Even in 2023, sex still sells. Why do you think OnlyFans is a thing? I mean, OnlyFans, yeah, that OF website. Can I even say that one on YouTube? Anyway, that site exists. It sells. It sells a lot. And yeah, that's why you would have magazines with, the pretty girl or whatever playing the game when the gamepad isn't actually connected to the thing, or the thing's not on and stuff, and it was kind of glaring. You look at it and you're like, you laugh at it for a second, because it's like, yeah, okay. You're not playing. But anyway, then Gamergate. See, here we are. It's the Gamergate portion here. Then Gamergate. When that began as an unfounded attack on female video game developers, metastasizing into an all-out assault on female writers and developers. After an initial explosion of attention, Gamergate left the headlines, but for women, people of color, and LGBTQ plus individuals in gaming, the harassment never went away. Yeah, where was the other thing that was actually explaining the start of Gamergate? Wish I had a highlighter that would actually highlight. So it doesn't want to highlight anymore for some reason. Like, my highlighter, for some reason, the plugin just doesn't work anymore, and I can't highlight things anymore. Really sucks. But yeah, let's see. We talked about in 2018 Riot Games and their class action lawsuit where they settled for $100 million. We talked about that on the channel, by the way. I can't remember what all we went over with it, but we did talk about it. But yeah, let's see. I can't find it because maybe that was it. Anyway, so they talk about Gamergate for a split second. There was more in this article. Now I can't find it. Where they were talking about how it was this all-out harassment or an unfounded attack on video game developers. So for those who are in the uninitiated, who wasn't around for 2014 when this whole thing started and saw what actually happened, here's what actually happened. Now, you've got a developer, what was her name? Zoe Quinn, I believe, is what her name, and she had made this text-based game called Depression Quest, which was really, it's whatever. She liked it, she made it, that's fine, good on her. It was a dumb game in my opinion. Anyway, she had apparently been sleeping around with various games journos, okay, and getting favorable press. Now, people will say things like, well, they were giving her game she was sleeping with them for good game reviews and things like that, which just simply wasn't the case, right? Because they didn't actually review the game. Instead, they talked about it in a certain spot and then would plug it for her. Like, this game is great, like Depression Quest, right? And plug it into the article in some way, shape, or form in that similar fashion. Now, she was apparently sleeping with these people to get into that position to where her game would get some praise inside the article. And what had happened is her boyfriend found out. He was not too happy about it, and he wrote up this entire blog post about it and pretty much, exposed her to everyone that, she's doing this with game journos, and game journos are doing things in return for her, favors at the time. And at that particular time, we had been for years talking about how game journals are being disingenuous and how they're ethics seem to have gone into the gutter and all this other stuff, and there's no real ethics there. And it was, in reality, Gamergate was a thing about ethics in gaming's journalism, right? We wanted to bring ethics back to it and actually have game journalists, I don't know, write about games and be ethical about it, instead of taking sexual favors or something from somebody and giving something like a massive score when it doesn't deserve it. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened with The Last of Us, but I'm using this as an example because this was in the height back in 20 whatever it was when The Last of Us Part 2 came out, of other things that were kind of adjacent to this whole Gamergate thing after Gamergate had died down and no longer became a thing, and the FBI found that Gamergate did absolutely nothing wrong. Yes, the same FBI who wants to go after, these people's most hated enemy in the world, Trump. Can I say his name yet on platforms? I can on Rumble. Anyway, they go after... They went after Gamergate, found out nothing was wrong. There was a lot of people involved in it, a lot of higher profile people that I hadn't actually seen in a long time or heard anything from, like, what was one? I think, was it Chris? No, not Chris Ray. Was it? Maybe? No, it must have been somebody else. I can't remember who it was. But that one guy, the pipsqueak looking one. I can't remember what his name is. Anyway, apparently he had written a death threat or a bomb threat or something at some point to an Anita Sarkeesian thing or something. And, Mr. Repzion, that's who it was. Anyway, apparently he had apparently written some kind of threat and stuck it on a letter on a door or something and signed it Mr. Repzion, and they came knocking on his door or something going, "Hey, did you do this?" And it's like, no. But yeah, silly, stupid things like that. It was so bad that they made up essentially things to make Gamergate into something that it wasn't, right? Like this idea of, Anita Sarkeesian, I think, was getting really big because she decided to step in to the middle of everything. Brianna Wu gained her prevalence through this movement as well by making themselves the center of attention, making up bullshit. Every time that, like, the news talks about the evil games and stuff like that in Gamergate, they like to bring up, like, the same 7 tweets, which came from a Twitter egg account that, like, literally, I think it was Anita would tweet things, and then this account would immediately tweet within seconds right afterwards. So either it was just like waiting for her to do that all in one day and then disappear and GTOF off the internet, or maybe she was in control of both accounts or something. Who knows? That's just speculation because nothing was ever really founded on that sort of thing. But yeah, it was never this big boogeyman that they wanted it to be. Essentially, they have to trump it up, which is why an article like this exists in 2023, almost a decade later, to make it into this big boogeyman that it never was to begin with, right? Turning it into this thing where these guys just can't handle the fact that there are lead women. No, it's the fact that we can't deal with bad writing and bad games. And that's always usually the thing that has anything to do with it. There are people from all walks of life criticizing that one game that we recently talked about that I can't think of its name because of poor writing. The graphics look fine, the gameplay seems to be solid, but the writing is so horrendous that everybody from, all different colors and shades and everything else seem to just not like it for some reason. But yeah, it's not like there was ever this huge issue because, with female protagonists, which, you have to jump through mental hula hoops or whatever just to even make it seem like somehow people were having an issue with it. Whether you want to sit there and say that you don't like how they were presented or whatnot, whatever, but right here is just a list of random pretty much leads or main people in the series, right? Like Silent Hill, the Silent Hill 3 series or whatnot, that was back from 2002 or something like that, right? Shoot, let me bring it up. I don't remember. What was it? When did these games come out? Back in 2023 or 2023? 2003, right? Like nobody was really hollering about Silent Hill 3 being this bad game. You've got Lara Croft who's been around forever. A lot of the times when you talk about Laura Craft and they get all upset about her, they are pointing at like her old design, right, with the large breasts and how they're pointed and stuff over here off to the side. And that's due to the limitations of graphics, right? Like naturally Laura should have some larger size there just because that's how she is, but the reason why they're pointed like that isn't because gamers and developers are sexist or anything. It was literally the limitation of how many polygons you could put on the screen and the fact that we couldn't do rounded textures at the time, yet for fuck's sake. Anyway, Miss Pac-Man, nobody complained about her. Yeah, I know, Miss Pac-Man. Ooh, Samus Aran is always a big one that people like to point at immediately. It's like, this person existed. There was another game that was a one-shot, I think, for the 64 that was really good. I think it was for the 64. Had a purely female protagonist that was really, really good too. And it never saw a sequel or anything else for that matter. But like this idea that gamergaters couldn't handle females or, people of color, as they put it, or gays or lesbians in lead roles or anything else is just downright asinine. It always has been. And I don't understand how they have been able to keep this up as the boogeyman as they are. You got Nier Automata, Alloy from Zero Dawn. Alloy? Oh, yeah, her. What's her name? Yeah, like the thing that people hated about her and the new one is because of how chunky they made her compared to what she was, essentially. It's like it felt unrealistic for her to suddenly be the way she was, and they were bending over backwards to say, well, technically she's aged, and it's like, but you're living in a world where you're moving constantly and all this other stuff and trying to survive pretty much a post-apocalyptic world type thing with robots and other stuff and things. It's just not realistic, right? And it was a deviation from her previous design to the point that people who loved the series just wasn't too crazy about it. But once they got past that, they absolutely loved the game too, right? This isn't things that you would put on, as they always like to use as sexism and stuff like that. And Yuna is like the default name I use for just about anything nowadays. When I want to give it a female sounding name, no idea why. Well, it's purely because of Final Fantasy, right? But Final Fantasy X, she was not the main protagonist, but she was a very important one. And then in 10-2, which was debated on whether or not it's a good game or not, depending on who you're talking to, she was the main protagonist in there. Nobody really cared that you were playing with Riku, Yuna, and Pain. And that, it was just the departure from the Final Fantasy series and how things were handled with the previous game into it. That was the points of contingencies that people usually had over the game, not the fact that she was female. Naturally, there are things that need to be looked into and dealt with, like the whole Riot thing, Blizzard and their thing that was going on, and stuff like that. And that is something we could all agree on to look into and fight against and stuff like that. But for the most part, there isn't some overarching villain of Gamergate who hate women and minorities and whatever else you want to put as a thing to make isms or something like that, right? Attacking the ladies or anything. It's just gamers who hate bad games at this point. And of course, Gamergate itself was about ethics in gaming's journalists, which, Rolling Stones here has displayed a huge lack in, which I'm not surprised. It's the Rolling Stones. They're not exactly gaming's journalists, but for them to have a, a lack in ethics just doesn't surprise me, because that seems to be a lot of journalists these days. Their ethics are out the door and have been for a very, very long time. Anyway, I just want to talk about this for a second, harp on it, because why not? Gamergate is in the headlines again, so it gives me a chance to title this about Gamergate. And you can let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I will talk to you later. See ya.